it's me again, Bailey Schluter from the McLeod County Historic Partnership. Last time I was here, I highlighted some of the projects to do with the Glencoe Historic Preservation Society and the City of Mountain. And I said that I would bring some pieces from Historic Hutchinson, but unfortunately, we've just started cataloging their collection, so we don't have as much history to go with the objects. But I have something I think is a little bit more fun. So Historic Hutchinson just completed a research project to photograph, catalog, and research the graffiti left behind in the Hutchinson Depot. Now, if you don't know what that is, you know the big white wooden train depot on Adams Street. You've probably driven past it 100 times. But what you might not know is that inside the coal room is floor-to-ceiling graffiti, some of it over 100 years old, left behind by former McLeod County citizens and Great Northern Railway employees. They used wet coal to draw pictures, write their name, do math in some occasions. We see some of that, and it's on the walls, most of it on the north, south, and west walls, and there's a few on the ceiling, if you can believe it. But it's a wonderful piece of history, and the graffiti survived a fire. It survived the building being relocated to its current place, and Historic Hutchinson got a grant through the Clean Water, Land, and Legacy Amendment to hire a photographer, a researcher, and a cataloger, and this took a lot of volunteer work to do. They've set up a grid system on the walls where most of the graffiti is so that it could be divided and cataloged and inventoried. So every single piece of graffiti has a label that shows where on the wall, what wall it's on, and where on the wall it's on, so we can stay organized. And it took volunteers to literally, they built a grid system so every section has equal 2 foot by 2 foot squares. Those squares were photographed and measured, and the individual pieces of graffiti were also measured and photographed. So over 300 images were captured inside the depot. And then we hired a researcher to go through all of those photographs and find as many names as possible for her to research and write about. And I'm going to share a few of those stories with you today. So the first one is from Fred Trendy. The picture I brought is of the sliding door on the south wall, and it says $5 fine to come in here, Fred Trendy. So you see they joked a little bit as well as left their mark. Now his name appears a couple other times, one on the north wall written in really, really nice cursive, which I'm very impressed with, writing with hard coal. And another one on the south wall, again, that says Fred Trendy. But he was born in Renville to parents who were German immigrants, and he lived there until he was born in 1889 and lived in Renville and McLeod County the rest of his life. He graduated from Hutchinson High School and then registered for the draft for World War I in 1917. But after the war, he came back to Hutchinson. He owned a house on 25 Adams Street. So if you know where that is, you can go see the house. And the house was valued for $3,000 in 1903. But for the rest of his life, he worked as an express agent for the Great Northern Railway and appeared to have a lot of fun while doing it. The next one is a drawing. It's a drawing of a person with the name Harry Arthur Hose. I hope I pronounced that last name right, but it's dated April 7th, 1928. So and a lot of these these graffiti sections are dated, some in the 1800s, some in the very early 1900s. So we're very thankful to those who dated their stamp, we could call it. But I wanted to point out this piece of graffiti because Harry Arthur did not work for the Great Northern Railway. He didn't even live in Hutchinson. He grew up in Glencoe. But this is not the only example of citizens who visited the depot. Maybe they had family or friends who worked there, or they snuck in and they saw all these names and all these drawings and they wanted to be included. But Harry's father, Arthur, was a founding member of Security State Bank in Glencoe. He organized the bank and served as the chairman for the board of directors. And his son, Howard, born in 1917, followed in his father's footsteps. He was one of the first to work for the Security State Bank after it was founded. He later served in the United States Navy during World War II, and he was a member of the Glencoe Rotary Club, the Glencoe Area Chamber of Commerce, and he was a treasurer for the Glencoe Public School Board of Education. Howard was a founding member of the Good Shepherd Lutheran Church in Glencoe, and he retired in 2001. He lived the rest of his days in that community. The next one is Joseph Leckie. I bring up Joseph Leckie because we don't know which Joseph Leckie wrote his name on the wall. It was a family name that was passed down through 3 generations, all of which worked for the Great Northern Railway and lived in McLeod County. We can kind of guess based on the age of the building and when it was operation, but there's no way to 100% confirm if it was Joseph Leckie Sr., born in the early 1830s, originally from what is now the Czech Republic. We don't know if it was his son, Joseph Leckie, born in 1858 in Austria and came to live in Hutchinson after his family immigrated, or if it was his son, Joseph E. Leckie, born in Minnesota in 1903 and worked and lived around McLeod County as a bookkeeper for their Northern States Power Company. So, and there's another example of this familiar name getting passed on, but there's other examples of just names that are too common to confirm, one of which is Carl Anderson, one of the names written on the ceiling. There are 3 Carl Andersons who lived in McLeod County, worked for the Great Northern Railway, all around the same time. So we wrote their biographies, but again, we don't know which one. But it's kind of a fun happenstance to because that's just more opportunities for us to research more people and to get these stories documented, which I love. The next story is Richard Pugh. Now, he was a Hutchinson citizen through and through. He was born in 1888, and he was a Hutchinson High School track star, part of the Minnesota High School championship team in 1909. And he volunteered to serve in World War I before the United States officially joined the war. So when he enlisted in 1917, he was part of the Canadian infantry for 1 year before he was transferred to ROTC in Fort Snelling. His draft card and his photograph is at the McLeod County Historical Society. So you could see his name in the depot and you could see his enlistment photo. But he's described as having dark hair and blue eyes. And he completed his training at Camp Dodge in Iowa. By By 1920, he was living in North Dakota. He owned a home and was working at as a publisher, and then later moved back to Hutchinson to work. But another interesting thing about Richard was that he re-enlisted in 1942. So he was part of the generation that served in the First World War and the Second. He served as a colonel at headquarters, and was discharged in 1947. He lived a full life, we'll say. Now, this last one that I'm showing you, we don't know if it's a drawing of a man named Frank Wolf, and we don't know if there ever was a Frank Wolf. But I had to show you this because this drawing is over 6 feet tall and it's 4 feet wide, and it's this beautiful villainous cartoon drawing. You got the twisty eyebrow, and it's of this villain, this hilarious villain, and it's labeled as Frank Wolf. And there's a message next to this giant drawing that says $500 reward for the capture of Frank L. Wolf. He escaped from the GN, Great Northern Coach, from an old sleuth by jumping out of the window on August 1st, we think 1901, but that year is kind of smudged. But it's the first thing that captures your eye when you enter the depot from any direction, this giant drawing. It stands out. It's still in beautiful condition. And it's so big that people wrote their names or their initials on top of it as well, which is really cool. So this book has all the research that was compiled. There are complete biographies. There's also a section dedicated to those graffiti that we weren't able to identify, either drawings or people's initials or part of a last name or part of a first name. So if you wanted to come look at this, you can contact Historic Hutchinson, or this book is available through the research library at the McLeod County Historical Society. Historic Hutchinson donated a hard copy of the book and digital versions of the photographs, so you can use their online software at the county museum to look through the photos yourself. It's just so cool. The history that the depot represents not only represents Hutchinson history and McLeod County history, but there are men and maybe women, one woman for sure, who maybe grew up in this area and then moved to different parts of the United States and Canada, and vice versa. People who were born in North Dakota, Wisconsin, Massachusetts, California, and then somehow ended up here, and somehow they found a way to leave their mark, and we got to write it down and preserve it. I'm so honored to be a part of it. Thank you, everyone. See you next time.